over the last few weeks, I've noticed I've been distancing myself from myself. So I decided to give myself a hug, and I've been spending quite a bit of time reorganizing and cleaning up my studio. It's actually it feels good. I don't know if you've seen it before, but it's kind of pristine, ready to go. It's whenever I feel inspired, but I've been a little bit distancing myself from myself, so I decided to I don't know, is it like let no good crisis go to waste? I use the time to reacquaint myself with my own space and make it work for me. This is about coronapsychosis, the virus psychosis that is going around, and I'm going to attach a few links again, as I did with the Vodarg, the quote, the statement by a very respected medical person, someone who studies viruses apparently, has concluded, as many other people have concluded, that this is a psychotic state that we have been immersed into and accepted. It's even worse. It's like the idea of accepting something. And I was noticing I had distanced myself from myself. Now, it may sound funny, but in a certain way, when as a painter, I try to my primary objective as a painter, aside from satisfying myself and my desires to find something within myself that is of significance and meaning, that in this lifespan, this short period of time that we're here, that something of significance emerges out of my being that is, I guess I could be proud of. It's like something that I feel good about. And I don't think I'm different from anyone else. I think that our nature is such that we find greater and greater satisfaction as we grow more comfortable with something within inside each of us that is specific to ourselves. This is kind of like the idea of originality hinges on the fact that there are things that each human being has within them, exhibits, not just visually. It's like visually we're all different, we're unique. But there are qualities within us that we don't understand, and if we self-distance from those qualities, we're going to be fucked. So, and if you are prone to self-distance from yourself, which is something that occurred way before this corona psychosis, this virus psychosis, that a person generally is distancing themselves from themselves, which is why it's been so easy to create this mantra of social distancing and all the associated regulations and rules that have come down from Mount Olympus for us to adhere to, because we're quite used to distancing ourselves from ourselves, which is something that I go on about quite often. I'm sort of weird. It's like I usually stand up when I'm standing when I talk, but now with my new studio, I've changed things around and it's much more elegantly set up. I'm sitting down. So anyway, I thought I'd chime in again. As in my last videos, they've been talking about this phenomenon that we are now experiencing at a very high rate of what I see compliance. My understanding of people around me, for the most part, I would say there is, in terms of my contact, the limited contact I have, there is a very high degree of compliance from the point of view that there is an underlying fear that what if this is right? What if this is true? What the owners and the propagators of this mantra, this story, what if they're right? Like, people have have a kind of the self-preservation, I guess, kicks in, saying, what if it's true and I'm not complying with the orders that are out there? And this is a result, what I call self-distancing from oneself. So in many of my commentaries, I have referred to the fact that without some sort of, and this is not arbitrary, some sort of meaningful connection to what I'll call it now a sense of self, but what does that entail? What is it that makes me feel that I have something, as I like to say, to chew on when I reflect on what it is that emerges, independent of anything out there, emerges from within. This is of high interest to me, which is something that I see in other artists that I admire and respect, and other people that I admire and respect. There is a something. It doesn't have to be an original thought or anything, but it's something that I feel comes sincerely and honestly from a core. Something I find difficult in this YouTube experience for as long as it might last. I don't know how much longer it'll last, because I keep hearing that channels are being severely censored. This is apparently true. Go ahead and censor me. I mean, it's the reason they don't pick on me is because I only show maybe 100 or 200 views if I'm lucky. So I'm not afflicted by this what is it, that overreach of a circumstance on this platform to be censored. There are people like the SG report specifically. I guess they're making good money on posting stuff all the time. And I left a comment on a guy I really like, Quantum of Conscience, and I said, you know, maybe he needs to just give it a rest. I think the guy's addicted to posting, and somebody said, well, he's making money from it. Well, nonetheless, it's still a kind of addiction. If you're addicted to making money from something, and the only reason you do it is because you have an income, and yeah, okay, that makes sense, I guess, if you see it as a job. But it's perceived, what I perceive on YouTube happening is people express that thing that interests me of themselves. And this particular fellow, I said he needs to take a rest from it, because he's regurgitating the man's story to such a high level of perfection that it's going to affect him personally at some point. It already has, I think. So anyway, my point today, as I go through withdrawals from self-distancing from myself, I'm kind of feeling I'm not entirely inspired, which is interesting, because there's never been such a long period in my experience of not working. There have been circumstances in my studio. I had a tragedy. This rack that you see there with stuff on it, it's a smaller rack now with all the rolls, and paintings are hanging behind it. Like I built another one back there, and paintings are hanging, and it fell down. I think I had close to 7,000 or 8,000 pounds on it, and it wasn't built for that. My nephew and I built it, and he said, it's not my fault. It's like, you know, I said 6,000 pounds shearing strength on screws. Anyway, I didn't take it to heart, and one day it just collapsed. It shocked me about 2 weeks ago. It shocked me, but it gave me an opportunity to clean the studio up. So what is it about the psychosis? Yeah, one thing I really don't like or don't like doing is focusing on the outside world in everything that I think or say or do. There needs always to be a healthy mix of that inner world and outer world. It's kind of like a meeting. Maybe it's a 50-50. I think it should be more like 70 inner, 30 outer kind of thing, in order to get real value out of this experience of living. Because if we continuously focus on what's outside, we end up chewing on the things that are being given to us, rather than chewing on the things that originate from within. So this psychotic circumstance we find ourselves in on this pathetic pathetic notion of a virus killing us in a pandemic version. This is the other part of it. It's like people die. Like I've said, death now has been turned into a pandemic. People dying has turned into a pandemic. Very clever, very smart. And there are reasons behind this. And people who are propagating this notion are even unwittingly are complicit. Is the depravities that are coming down through this psychotic episode in our history are going to be far reaching. They just don't stop. Like it's impossible for this just to end and stop, and the normal, and then this ridiculous notion of new normal. It's either normal or abnormal. What is a new normal? No such thing, right? So we kind of get fed mantras that are primarily always this outer world imposing itself. And the reason it can impose itself is because we've been self-distancing from ourselves. I kind of like this notion, self-distancing from oneself. And we get into trouble. We get into trouble because, yeah, people say then it's like a herd thing that happens. Everybody follows the person in front of them, and the next thing you know is you're on a boxcar and there's no return. Okay. I'm going to attach a few, for what it's worth. I don't place a great deal of importance on this. The links I will attach about very qualified people having their say on this psychotic response, because I've always said we all know. And we all know from the point of view that as we become more in touch with something that is meaningful to us, that is not something we've just taken on from outside, but it's meaning because we really have identified it within ourselves to be important. It's like, let's say, for example, if, like in my case, like I am committed to making paintings because I've identified something in myself that is gains a great deal of satisfaction out of producing a visual that represents something I had never conceived of. It's like I surprise myself. This is of great value to me personally. Other people have great deals of, there's a pleasure principle in this, but satisfaction is even beyond pleasure. It's like a satisfaction is a kind of self-justification. It's kind of like rubbing shoulders with the omnipotent being, that sort of selfness that is on a very high level. It feels right. It's not just pleasurable, but it feels right. Pleasure is highly overrated in many ways because there's a rightness to something that doesn't necessarily always feel pleasurable. It's like when you do hard work. It's not pleasure to do hard work. It's like you push yourself to the extreme, but there is a great deal of satisfaction associated with it. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's sort of the kind of thinking I'm having here. And the idea that a person, and I could list quite a number of YouTubers that I no longer really bother with too much, but I'll give good example, like this Owen Benjamin guy, or SGT, or even Quantum of Conscience. I've realized that as much as the insight is valuable, it actually is part of the game that is being played. And even this Matt fellow has talked about this, that he feels himself, he has moments of clarity which allow him to understand that even repeating the things that he's exposing and the bastards, what they're doing, is contributing and compliant on some level. It's kind of, it's sort of it's an irony. It's an oxymoron. It makes no sense from the point of view that you're exposing the bastards, but at the same time, you're complicit in furthering the mantras that are being proposed. Even in the negative, you can actually be aiding and abetting something. This is what I'm saying. And there has to be a very clear separation of self between the official or the external world. I'll call it the official world, which isn't really official. It's a fabrication. It's something that has no substance or weight to it. Again, like if you go into the substance of matter, the deeper down you go, the less there is. You see, there's another irony here. Even in the religion of science, there has been this discovery that as you get into smaller and smaller aspects of matter and existence, what we understand to be a substance and hardcore stuff, there's nothing there. It's a vacuum. It's kind of, it's kind of weird. So the world that is of the substantive world that is being created for us actually has no substance in the way we understand it. So I guess my commentary today is how to extract ourselves from this psychotic event. And I don't think I was really caught in it. And in fact, I kind of like that lack of activity. It's like I mentioned, the chemtrails have stopped as well for the most part, but there's actually blue skies quite often now. So there is some kind of effect on the bastards that are running the lines through the sky. They had to stop as well. Don't know why that happened. I would have figured they'd continue. But anyway, as long as there is this extreme focus on what comes from outside, we will not resolve the psychotic event. This psychotic event will escalate into some other level of, the degenerates will figure out a way to escalate this event into the next level. I've talked to friends who agree with me and have concluded that this is just the beginning. It's sort of like 9/11 on steroids. It's like so over the top. So if it was a setup, if 9/11 was a setup, this is a setup for something even more severe. This is what I'm saying. This is why I call it the corona psychosis, or the virus psychosis that we're experiencing, because it's not just going to end here. It's going to continue. And the resolve that we have personally to not self-isolate from ourselves is really the answer. As the self-isolation is shown to be by many of the experts, they say this is the wrong thing to do, even if it was true. Even if it was true, this is the wrong thing to do. I'm not sure at what level people would have to die for something like isolation to make sense. I really don't know. I can't. My sense of it is that there is a natural response in each human being to do the right thing. We're not just going to be the lemmings off the edge. And of course, lemmings never did that, but I don't know why they were afflicted with this horrible idea, but the lemmings going off the side. I think that there is a natural there's a natural response within all of us collectively that will do the right thing if we are allowed, if we allow ourselves not to self-distance from ourselves. Yeah, I'm kind of rambling, and because I said a while back, I've said all I want to say, because there's no point in repeating the same thing over and over. And what I'm saying is the outer world has taken over 90–95%, if not 100%, in most of the presenters on YouTube. The outer world is everything. Now, they may live their lives in a decent way. They may have decent lives and practice things, but let's hear that. Let's hear that practice. I suppose the Owen Benjamin character, I think he's sort of a mouthpiece on another level, but at least he's understood this from the point of view he's showing himself existing. He's got a spread, he's got his family, he loves his kids, he's living his day-to-day life, raising alpacas, whatever, the chickens and the ducks and everything. That's fabulous. I think that's terrific. So there's a good message even that comes out of people. He comes right out of Hollywood. I have no faith in anyone that has ever been associated with Hollywood. It's almost impossible to extract yourself from that degenerate bunch. I mean, this becomes cellular. Whatever happened, whatever people have to go through when they've encountered Hollywood, you're going to end up in a major psychosis yourself. And it's just a cover. And the Owen Benjamin guy, it's a cover. The guy has major problems, but it doesn't come out because the message can be good, and you can take something from that message. I take something from that message, but I'm not fooled. So do I want to? Yeah, I said a while ago that I've said all I want to say from the point of view that I will let you know if I have a greater, deeper insight than other than what I've given to live my conscience and to do the right thing as much as possible on every level. Doesn't mean we don't make mistakes, but this has been something that I've understood through my activism on the nuclear issue, which is continuing to be an important issue, especially with 450 some plants all ready to do their mucky, the toxicities that will come from these. Talk about the virus. I'll just sort of end it here, I think, with the virus thing. A virus is not a living entity the way it's being promoted as, oh, it lives on the stuff that you touch and all this. No, it's not how it works. A virus is an internal response to toxic levels, toxicity, which is why in this attachment I'm going to have the medical people talk about the high levels of air pollution in northern Italy and China. It's very similar. They called northern Italy the China of Europe. And the reason people have lung problems is because the situation is like really nasty. The toxic levels that people are breathing in all the time is bad. So a lot of people died. But it's not a pandemic. It's not a pandemic from the point of view the way the story goes. And viruses, if you research this, and I'm not an expert, I'm just saying what I have deemed to be a wholesome analysis of what it is that we're looking at suggests to me that what we're being fed is a bunch of hooey. The stuff sits on little areas and is ready to grab you like a terrorist. These viruses are little terrorists, and we become terrorists because we carry them and all this. It's not how it works. It's not how it works. But then we're in the throes of this scientific religion that seems to have grabbed everybody by the balls and the short and curlies, and it's going to be difficult to overcome this psychotic event. So when I've referred to the fact that I have said all I want to say, I'm repeating myself now, but it's within the context, and it's kind of like making a painting where I actually rely on something that has worked for me before, but I attempt to bring something else to the table. I mean, this is something I don't want to do the same thing over and over again. There are a lot of artists who just sort of milk a single idea. Picasso is a good example of this, although Picasso could have stopped really working after 1908. I think he could have just quit and still be a major force in terms of art, but he continued and kind of repeated himself on stuff, and well, so be it. That's okay. And there are other artists that are quite extraordinary in the sense that they develop, and this has been scorned in the cultural circles to some extent because you can't pinpoint certain people. Gerhard Richter is a good example of this, although I'm not on board entirely with the Gerhard Richter phenomenon, that there is quite a variation from high realism or very realistic imagery to a totally abstract imagery. So there is that is admirable. I believe that to be admirable. But he had established himself. He'd been absorbed into the bosom of the culturati, into the heroes of culture. They had exclaimed him to be a master on Mount Olympus, one of the masters. So there is not much credibility I give him because he could do whatever he wants and wouldn't be rejected. Let him do this when he was like a pauper and trying to get his foot in the door. He did exactly what he thought people want to see. Okay, what's my point? I was going to round it off. I was going to finish it off. Yeah, so I've said what I want to say, but there are variations on the theme, and this corona psychosis is building. I can't see them being able to just drop it unless there is a major revision in the psyche of humanity. This is going to go and get worse. That's my conclusion, because the self-distancing from self has taken new levels. It's like now it feels like people are lonely and stuck in their circumstances, and what do they have to fall back on? There's like, before there were a lot of distractions. Now there are no distractions. So what happens to that individual? They become more traumatized. The traumas that are now the traumas that are going to escalate Unless there is, like in California, people came out and said, fuck you, we're not going to take this bullshit anymore. We're refusing to comply with your illegal and unconstitutional directives. I mean, it makes perfect sense. So, yeah, I guess it's my voice, a small voice with among the compatriots and souls, the souls that are vibrating on the same level. I enjoy getting my few people that I talk to coming back, and knowing that there are others out there that have an understanding of this inner world and the outer world and are able to distinguish makes this YouTube experience still worthwhile for me. So I guess I'll post this, and I'm ready to go. I got my canvas. Let's see. It's like I'm not sure. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I'm feeling a bit. I'm feeling a bit lost in certain ways because not because of what's happening out there, but in terms of what's happening within my own life. And I actually like the lockdown in many ways because it hasn't changed life for me at all. Really, it's my my life has been self-isolation for the last 20 years in many ways. There are nuances, I suppose, that I enjoyed before that I can't now, but it doesn't make a big difference to my life. Anyway.